There is a kind of stagnation that does not come from abandoning prayer, losing faith, or walking away from God. It happens even when a person continues believing, continues seeking, continues trying to do everything right. And the most painful part of this kind of stagnation is not the pain itself, it is the repetition. It is waking up and realizing the day begins exactly the same way. It is fighting, and ending up in the same place again. Over time, this repetition creates a quiet suspicion inside the soul. Maybe the problem isn't the circumstances. Maybe it isn't the enemy. Maybe it isn't God's will. Maybe the problem is something I do every day without realizing it. Maybe what keeps the cycle alive is not a lack of faith, but an invisible habit, one so subtle that it trains the brain in the wrong direction while the heart sincerely cries out to God. This is where many people become confused, because the person does not see themselves as negative, rebellious, or unbelieving. They pray, they read scripture, they ask God for help. But outside of the prayer moment, something else is happening in parallel, almost automatically, almost imperceptibly. There is a constant repetition, a daily way of speaking, a habitual way of narrating one's own life, an internal dialogue that slowly shapes how the person thinks, reacts, and decides. And the longer this continues, the more natural it feels, until the person begins to call it my personality, my mindset, this is just how I am. But Jesus never treated this as personality, he treated it as a path. Maybe you have never stopped to observe this seriously, but Jesus did. He paid attention to how people spoke, how they answered, how they justified themselves, how they defined their own identity. And he taught something that most people overlook. What you keep in your mouth is not neutral. What you repeat becomes a trail, and trails over time become roads. This is why so many people remain stuck even while loving God. Not because God failed, but because their daily training points in the same direction it always has. Before we go any further, I need to tell you something important. At the end of this teaching, we will pray. Not as an emotional ritual, not as a dramatic climax, but as a conscious act of repositioning to seal this teaching internally. Not now, at the end, because first you need to understand what Jesus was actually teaching. Only then does it make sense to align the heart. Now pay attention. Jesus never taught transformation as a single event. He taught transformation as a process governed by continuity. And one of the areas where he was most direct and most ignored was when he spoke about the mouth. Not as moralism, not as speaking nicely, but as an instrument of government. Scripture says, "Death and life are in the power of the tongue." Proverbs 18:21. This is not poetic exaggeration, it is a description of a mechanism. Jesus understood that what leaves the mouth over time descends into the heart and begins to govern direction. Notice how he teaches this practically. He says, "Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks." Matthew 12:34. Most people read this as a spiritual diagnosis, but Jesus is revealing an order. First, the heart is filled by repetition. Then the mouth begins to speak what has been stored. And when the mouth speaks, the ears hear. And what the ears hear returns inward. It is a cycle, a training loop, a system of reinforcement. Modern science calls this neural reinforcement. Jesus taught it 2,000 years ago as a path. The invisible error of most people is not thinking wrong once. It is repeating without noticing. Repeating small, seemingly harmless phrases. Nothing ever changes. It's always been this way. I can't. There's no point. It only happens to me. These are not just emotional releases, they are commands. And the more a person repeats them, the more the brain learns that route as default. Over time, it stops being a thought and becomes a reflex. The person reacts before realizing it, decides before choosing, and then calls it destiny. Jesus confronts this exact place when he says, "It is not what enters the mouth that defiles a person, but what comes out of the mouth." Matthew 15:11. He is not only talking about moral purity, he is talking about direction. What comes out of the mouth reveals what is governing internally, and at the same time reinforces that government. This is why Jesus never treated words as a detail. To him, words were seeds, and seeds repeated create harvests. Now be honest with yourself. How many times have you prayed for change, then spent the rest of the day narrating your life as if nothing would ever change? How many times have you asked God for strength while training fear with your own mouth through small, casual phrases? This does not make you a hypocrite, it makes you human. But it also explains why so many people pray correctly and remain stuck. Because there's a difference between asking God for something and training your brain to walk in that direction. Jesus made this clear when God spoke to Joshua. "This book of the law shall not depart from your mouth." Joshua 1:8. Notice the detail. God does not say only think or only believe internally. He says, do not stop speaking. Because speaking creates repetition. Repetition creates paths, create direction. Direction creates results. This obedience is not mystical, it is practical. The problem is that many people believe change comes from emotional intensity, a powerful service, a tearful prayer, a dramatic moment. But Jesus never taught intensity as a method. He taught continuity, habit. That is why he said, "If you abide in my word," John 8:31. Not hear once, not repeat occasionally. Abide. Abiding is training. Abiding is discipline. Abiding is allowing the word to occupy the mouth until it governs the heart. Here is a hard but liberating truth. The brain does not distinguish prayer from murmuring when it comes to training. It learns from repetition. If you pray faith for 5 minutes but speak fear the rest of the day, the dominant training is not faith. Not because God does not hear your prayer, but because your daily habit is teaching something else. Jesus knew this. That is why he did not only heal, he taught paths. He did not only deliver, he showed people how not to return to the same place. Maybe you are beginning to see something now that was never explained clearly before. Maybe what has been shaping your life most is not what you believe, but what you repeat. Maybe the habit that most reconfigures the brain is not thinking better, but speaking differently, consistently. Not once, not when inspired, but daily, because that is how the brain learns. Jesus knew this when he said, "What I say to you, I say to all, watch." Mark 13:37. Watching is not only guarding external behavior, it is observing what leaves the mouth, because government begins there. Now, do not confuse this with positive thinking or empty affirmations. Jesus never taught denial of reality. He taught refusing to submit to reality as the final word. Do not judge by appearances, but judge with righteous judgment. John 7:24. Appearance says it's over. Righteous judgment says it's not finished. And what you choose to repeat decides who governs you, appearance or truth. In this first part, I want you to hold on to one thing only, without trying to apply anything yet. There is a daily, silent, almost automatic habit that is training your brain. And that habit is connected to your mouth. Not to what you feel once, but to what you repeat always. Jesus did not teach change through intensity. He taught change through continuity. And while you do not see this, you keep asking God for something He has already taught you how to build. If there is one thing Jesus never treated as fixed, it was human behavior. He never spoke to people as if they were condemned to repeat the same cycles forever. On the contrary, in almost every scene of the Gospels, Jesus operates from one assumption. A human being can learn another way. A person can unlearn. A person can be reoriented. A person can be trained. The difference is that Jesus never called this training the brain. He called it walking, following, remaining, learning, obeying. But the mechanism is the same. Repetition produces transformation. The problem is that most people believe the mind works like a photograph. Something forms in childhood, freezes, and that's it. I'm just like this. My mind works this way. I can't change. But Jesus never reinforced fixed identity language. When someone approached him trapped in a label, sinner, sick, rejected, broken, failure, Jesus did not argue with the label. He presented a path. And a path only exists for those who walk, for those who repeat steps, for those who accept being trained. Notice how Jesus taught. Enter through the narrow gate. Matthew 7:13. A narrow gate is not emotion, it is not intensity, it is not inspiration. A narrow gate is practice. It is conscious repetition. It is choosing the same kind of step over and over again, even when it would be easier to return to the wide, automatic, familiar road. The wide road is the old habit. The narrow gate is the new habit. And habits are not formed by a single decision. They are formed by daily training. Today, neuroscience describes this by saying the brain is plastic, moldable, capable of forming new connections throughout life. Jesus taught the same truth long before when he said, "Do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says." Doing is repetition. Repetition is instruction. Instruction reshapes the brain. This explains why so many people understand the teaching but do not change. They confuse comprehension with transformation. Understanding does not rewire the brain. Repetition does. Jesus never said, "Whoever understands my words will be free." He said, "If you remain in my word, you are truly my disciples." John 8:31. Remaining is continuity. Remaining is training. Remaining is accepting that change happens through prolonged exposure to truth, not through momentary impact. Here is a decisive point. The brain does not learn by exception. It learns by pattern. What you do occasionally does not form a path. What you repeat daily, even in small doses, becomes a mental trail, and mental trails begin to govern reactions, decisions, and even emotions. That is why Jesus cared so deeply about the ordinary, not only about dramatic spiritual moments. He taught while walking, while eating, while resting, while traveling, because training happens in the everyday. Think about how many times Jesus corrected someone not with a miracle, but with a question. Do you want to be healed? John 5:6. He asked this to a man who had been sick for 38 years. Not because Jesus lacked compassion, not because he did not know the answer, but because he was confronting a mental pattern, a brain trained for decades to live inside that condition. Jesus interrupts the old narrative before releasing the external change. Because if the pattern doesn't change, the person returns to the same place even after a miracle. This explains something few people say honestly. Some people receive answers from God but cannot sustain them. Not because God failed, but because their brain remains trained for the old road. This is what Jesus meant when he said, "Go and sin no more." John 8:11. He was not speaking only about morality. He was saying, do not return to the same pattern, because a repeated pattern rebuilds the same result. Now, watch how this connects back to the mouth, the central axis of this entire teaching. The brain learns through sensory repetition. What you hear repeatedly gains authority. What you say repeatedly gains even more. When Jesus says, "What comes out of the mouth defiles a person," Matthew 15:11, he is revealing something deeper than ethics. The mouth is not only an exit, it is also an entrance. What you speak, what you hear, the brain encodes, and the brain gives more weight to your own voice than to any other. That is why daily speech habits are so powerful. They do not merely express thought, they train tomorrow's thought. This is where many people become stuck without realizing it. They want change, but they continue narrating life with the same vocabulary. They describe themselves with the same labels. They reinforce, through small phrases, the same internal scenery. This is not evil, it is habit. And habits train the brain even without conscious intention. Jesus knew this. That is why he spoke so often about watching. Watch, Mark 13:37. Watching is not paranoia, it is awareness. It is observing what you repeat, because what you repeat shapes you. Maybe now you are beginning to see why so many attempts at change fail. Not because people don't want it badly enough, but because they underestimate the power of daily training. They want a new result with an old habit, a renewed mind without renewing the road the mind walks every day. Jesus never promised that. He promised transformation to those who learn from him. And learning, in biblical language, is closer to training than to studying. That is why Jesus used such simple images: seed, path, gate, yoke. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me. Matthew 11:29. A yoke is a training instrument. It teaches direction. It teaches rhythm. Jesus did not choose that word accidentally. He was saying, there is a way of walking with me that re-educates you internally, not through force, but through guided repetition. Here is the revelation of this part. Your brain is not your enemy, but it is not neutral either. It learns from what you do and say every day. If you do not assume this training consciously, it will be trained by fear, by past repetition, by environment, by noise. Jesus did not want emotional followers. He wanted disciples, people willing to learn a different path, a different rhythm, a different way of responding to life. In the next part, I will show you the specific turning point Jesus taught. Not a vague idea, not a motivational concept, but a practical instruction that dismantles the old cycle and installs a new axis of government. One of the most misunderstood reasons people fail to change is not rebellion, laziness, or lack of desire. It is impatience disguised as disappointment. Most people do not stop because the teaching doesn't work. They stop because they expected it to work faster than it was designed to. Jesus understood this better than anyone. That is why he spent so much time teaching about time. Not urgency, not speed, time. Over and over again, Jesus used images that required patience: seeds, soil, growth, waiting, ripening, harvest. These were not poetic choices, they were instructional. The first blade, then the ear, then the full grain in the ear. Mark 4:28. This single sentence dismantles one of the greatest lies that traps sincere people, the belief that change should be immediately visible if it's real. Jesus is teaching sequence, not delay as punishment, but delay as process. The seed is real the moment it is planted, but it is invisible before it is visible. Most people quit in the invisible phase. They begin speaking differently. They interrupt old patterns. They choose a new word. And after a few days or weeks, they look around and say, nothing changed. But Jesus never promised immediate visibility. He promised growth. And growth follows order. The mistake many people make is measuring internal change with external metrics too early. They are retraining the brain, but evaluating the environment. Jesus never taught that. He taught that the kingdom works like seed, quietly, invisibly, consistently. The kingdom of God is as if a man should scatter seed on the ground. He sleeps and rises night and day, and the seed sprouts and grows. He knows not how. Mark 4:26-27. Notice the detail. The man does not control the growth. He does not monitor it obsessively. He does not dig the seed up every morning to check if it is working. He continues living. He continues repeating the action that planted the seed. This is where most people sabotage themselves. They speak one day, they repeat the next, then they stop to inspect results. And inspection interrupts training. Jesus never taught self-surveillance as a method. He taught faithfulness. Faithfulness is consistency without constant evaluation. Here is a crucial distinction. Consistency is not intensity stretched over time. Consistency is simplicity repeated. Most people burn out because they try to maintain emotional intensity instead of sustainable rhythm. Jesus never invited people into exhaustion. He said, "Come to me all who are weary and burdened. My yoke is easy and my burden is light." Matthew 11:28-30. A light burden does not mean no effort. It means the effort is aligned. It moves with the grain of how humans are designed to learn. This is why Jesus warned about starting and stopping. Which of you desiring to build a tower does not first sit down and count the cost? Luke 14:28. The cost here is not suffering, it is patience. It is staying with the process after the excitement fades. This is the phase where many people quietly quit. They do not abandon faith, they do not reject God. They simply return to old speech patterns. They stop correcting the mouth. They stop interrupting the narrative. Not because they chose rebellion, but because they assumed it was not working. Jesus anticipated this. That is why he taught about perseverance without anxiety. By your endurance, you will gain your lives. Luke 21:19. Endurance is not force. It is refusal to quit the path. Here is the truth most people miss. The brain does not change in bursts. It changes in layers. Every repetition adds a layer, and layers form stability. The danger is not slow progress. The danger is stopping too early. Jesus warned about this in the parable of the sower. Some seed falls on rocky ground. It springs up quickly but has no root. When pressure comes, it withers. This is not about lack of sincerity. It is about lack of depth. Depth is created by repetition over time. Roots grow where the soil is not disturbed. Every time a person abandons a new practice too early, they disturb the soil. They restart the process. They plant again and dig it up again. This creates exhaustion. Not because the way is hard, but because it is never allowed to mature. Jesus did not teach persistence as grinding effort. He taught it as trust in process. Trust that what is being planted is working even when unseen. Trust that repetition is doing its job. Trust that God designed growth to be quiet. This is why Jesus often said, "Do not be afraid." Fear here is not terror, it is urgency. It is panic that demands proof too soon. Jesus invites you out of that. He invites you into rhythm. Daily speech, daily correction, daily alignment. Not dramatic, not exhausting, sustainable. In the next part, we will expose the most subtle enemy of continuity, self-identity language, and how Jesus dismantled it without shaming. One of the most subtle enemies of transformation is not sin, trauma, or external opposition. It is identity language that freezes behavior and disguises habit as nature. Jesus confronted this constantly, but almost never directly. He did not argue with people about who they thought they were. He did not shame them for how they defined themselves. Instead, he offered a path that quietly contradicted the label. This is where many people get trapped without realizing it. They are not resisting change, they are explaining themselves. I'm just anxious. I've always been like this. That's my personality. This is how my mind works. These sentences feel honest, they feel self-aware, they feel harmless, but they do something dangerous. They turn a repeated behavior into identity, and once something becomes identity, the brain stops questioning it. Jesus never treated behavior as identity, he treated it as a path. When he met the Samaritan woman, he did not say, "You are immoral." He said, "Go, call your husband," John 4:16. He exposed a pattern without assigning a permanent name. When he healed the blind man, he did not say, "You are blind." He said, "Receive your sight," Luke 18:42. He spoke movement, not label. This is critical. Labels anchor the past, paths open the future. The danger of identity language is not that it is false, often it is accurate. The danger is that it turns something learned into something assumed to be permanent. Jesus never allowed people to build their future on past repetition. That is why he consistently interrupted self-descriptions. When Peter said, "Depart from me, for I am a sinful man," Luke 5:8, Jesus did not argue theology. He said, "Do not be afraid. From now on, you will catch men." From now on. That phrase matters. Jesus acknowledges the past without letting it govern the future. This is where identity language becomes a trap for continuity. If I believe this is who I am, I stop practicing alternatives. And if I stop practicing alternatives, the brain has nothing new to learn. Jesus dismantled identity traps by shifting focus from self-definition to following. Follow me. Not fix yourself, not understand yourself better. Follow. Movement requires repetition, and repetition reshapes identity from the outside in. Modern psychology confirms what Jesus taught intuitively. Identity does not precede behavior. Identity follows behavior. What you repeatedly do and say becomes what you believe about who you are. Jesus reversed the order. He invited people into new behavior first. Identity changed as a consequence. That is why he could say, "Go and sin no more," John 8:11. Not because the person suddenly felt different, but because practicing a new path would reconfigure self-perception. Here is where many sincere people sabotage continuity. They practice a new word for a while, then an old reaction appears, and instead of seeing it as residue, they interpret it as proof of identity. See, I knew it. This is just who I am. Jesus never taught residue invalidates direction. He taught patience with the process. Residue fades as repetition accumulates, but only if repetition continues. Identity language interrupts that continuation. It gives permission to stop. Jesus consistently resisted identity finality. He renamed people. Simon became Peter. Abram became Abraham. Sarai became Sarah. Renaming was not cosmetic, it was directional. A name spoken repeatedly trains expectation. Jesus was not pretending the old behavior never existed. He was training the future by changing what was spoken. This returns us again to the mouth. What you call yourself matters, not because words are magical, but because words train attention, expectation, and choice. If you repeatedly say, "I am anxious," the brain prepares for anxiety. If you repeatedly say, "I am learning peace," the brain stays plastic. One freezes, the other allows training. Jesus always chose language that kept movement possible. Even when correcting harshly, he aimed towards motion. "Neither do I condemn you. Go." John 8:11. Go. Movement, direction, not definition. This is why discipleship in Jesus is never about self-analysis alone. It is about following a way. Identity is shaped while walking, not before. In the next part, we will expose the final piece of the cycle, how environment and inner dialogue collaborate, and how Jesus taught intentional interruption. The final piece of the cycle is the one most people underestimate: environment. Not environment as scenery, environment as architecture. Jesus never treated transformation as a purely internal struggle. He constantly changed where people were, who they were with, and what rhythms governed their days. Before he asked for obedience, he redesigned context. This is where effort-based spirituality quietly collapses. People try to win internal wars while standing inside environments that keep re-triggering the same responses. Jesus did the opposite. He removed people from familiar loops before asking them to live differently. Follow me. That invitation was not symbolic. It meant leave your nets, leave your routines, leave your old timing, leave the environment that trained your reflexes. Transformation does not fail because people lack sincerity. It fails because the environment keeps rehearsing the old self. Jesus understood something modern neuroscience now confirms. The brain is context-sensitive. Certain places, people, sounds, and rhythms automatically activate old neural pathways. Trying to change behavior without changing context is like trying to stop an echo while shouting in the same canyon. Jesus redesigned the canyon. He taught in fields instead of synagogues. He prayed on mountains instead of crowded streets. He pulled disciples away from noise before teaching them depth. Even miracles were often preceded by environmental shifts. Come away by yourselves to a quiet place. Mark chapter 6, verse 31. Silence was not rest, it was recalibration. This leads to the collaboration between environment and inner dialogue. Your thoughts do not emerge in a vacuum. They are cued. A tone, a room, a time of day, a certain face. Jesus interrupted cycles by interrupting cues. When Elijah collapsed emotionally, God did not debate theology. He adjusted environment. Sleep, food, silence, then conversation. 1 Kings chapter 19. Design precedes instruction. This is why willpower alone never sustains transformation. Willpower is consumed quickly in hostile environments. Jesus did not rely on willpower. He relied on design, rhythms, routes, practices. He instituted meals. He established prayer times. He normalized retreat, not as religious obligations, but as environmental anchors. The Sabbath itself is environmental theology. Time redesigned. When time changes, the nervous system changes. When the nervous system changes, choices change. Jesus understood that spiritual formation happens at the intersection of repetition, language, environment. Remove one and the system destabilizes. This is why sudden emotional moments rarely last. They change feeling. They do not change architecture. Jesus never built on moments. He built on ways. Teach them to obey everything I have commanded you. Matthew chapter 28, verse 20. Teaching obedience is not demanding perfection. It is installing patterns. This reframes discipline completely. Discipline is not forcing yourself to do what you hate. Discipline is designing a life where the right thing becomes the easiest thing. Jesus' yoke is easy, not because effort disappears, but because resistance is reduced. Take my yoke upon you. Matthew chapter 11, verse 29. A yoke distributes weight. Environment distributes load. This is the final interruption Jesus offers, not confrontation, design. Change where you stand. Change who surrounds you. Change when you act. Then practice continues naturally. Identity follows. This completes the cycle. Not intensity, continuity. Not emotion, architecture. Not self-condemnation, design. Jesus did not ask people to become stronger. He asked them to walk differently. And walking differently long enough made them new. Even after everything is understood, repetition, language, environment, there is still one quiet question left. Why do some people walk this way and then slowly stop? Not because they fall, everyone falls, but because they forget why they started walking at all. Jesus never invited people to a system. He invited them to a way. And a way only stays alive when love stays attached to it. This is the hidden risk of spiritual maturity, familiarity. What once felt alive can become mechanical. What once felt like grace can become routine. Not because it lost power, but because the heart disconnected from wonder. This is why Jesus repeatedly returned people to relationship, not performance. Remain in me. John chapter 15, verse 4. Not performed for me, not impress me. Remain. Remaining is not effort, it is attention. Attention to presence, attention to meaning, attention to why the path mattered in the first place. When the heart stays connected, repetition stays alive. Without that connection, even the right design becomes hollow. This is why Jesus did not finish his teaching with rules. He finished with himself. I am with you always. Matthew chapter 28, verse 20. Transformation does not endure because the method is perfect. It endures because the person is present. At the end of all formation, all discipline, all design, there is not a technique. There is companionship. Jesus did not say, learn my system. He said, follow me. And following only works when love is still walking. This is the final safeguard. If the way ever feels empty, return to presence. Not to restart the system, but to remember the reason you began walking at all. Because the goal was never change for its own sake. The goal was communion. And communion, sustained, changes everything.